Hello everyone, hope you're all having a wonderful day, and today guys we're going to be going over what I think are the top 6 best strength weapons slash builds inside of Elden Ring. Now strength is a great stat in Elden Ring as it means we can use the biggest and heaviest weapons in the game to flatten the biggest and baddest enemies the game has to offer. This list was incredibly difficult to put together, seeing as there's like over 40 strength weapons in the base game, and the DLC kindly introduced another 14 to 15 weapons that also scale with strength. So you can kind of see how hard it is to shrink 50 to 60 strength weapons down into a top 6 build video. But I think I've finally managed to get a top 6 that I am sorta happy with. Since this is a top strength build video, I mainly wanted to focus on weapons that primarily scale off strength. So a lot of strength, intelligence, and a lot of faith weapons are just not going to be in this video. I just mainly wanted to focus on those pure strength Giga Chad weapons. So before anyone says, oh, but why doesn't this video have Malekith's Black Blade? Doesn't that weapon scale off strength too? Yes, it does, and it's a friggin' fantastic weapon at that, but it also scales with faith, so for this video, it's going in the friggin' bin. So I think I've rambled on long enough about what's going to be in the video and what's not going to be in the video. So let's not muck around any longer. Let's jump straight into it, boys. Now, the first weapon slash build I want to talk about is the Ruin's Greatsword. Okay, I know what you're thinking. I literally just said we're only going to mainly focus on weapons that primarily scale off strength. No strength, intelligence, strength, faith weapons. Well, there's 2 exceptions, okay? And this is one of them. And I mean, come on. This weapon scaling for strength is fucking S. Of course it was going to be on this list. Now that we got that little hiccup out of the way, the requirement for this weapon, if you do want to wield the Ruin's Greatsword, you're going to need 50 strength, big investment there, and also 16 intelligence. And the scaling for this weapon when it is plus 10 will be S for strength and D for intelligence, meaning this weapon scales really well with strength. So what makes the Ruined Greatsword so enjoyable to use inside of Elden Ring? Well, for starters, I'm pretty sure someone on the dev team had a massive hard-on for the Ruined Greatsword because it pretty much has everything going for it. Amazing Ash of War, a very unique charge attack that I'm pretty sure no other weapon has. I'm telling you guys, this weapon definitely got special treatment in the office. I'm pretty sure there's not very many weapons that do this, but when you do use a charge attack with the Ruined Greatsword, you slam it on the ground, you do big charge damage obviously because it's a fucking colossal sword, but when you hit the ground with a fully charged R2, you will send gravity rocks up from the ground. What other fucking weapon does that? There's like none. It's just crazy. And then on top of that, the Ash of War for the Ruin's Greatsword is no joke. The wave of destruction and that, you know, name checks out, because this is literally a wave of destruction. You smash your weapon into the ground, it sends a massive gravity fissure flying forward, destroys all the enemies, knocks enemies out of the way. It will knock bosses out of the way too, like it kind of pushes them along the actual Ash of War itself. So very, very strong Ash of War. If you do this close range, I'm pretty sure you do get the hit from the weapon as well as the Ash of War damage, so that's also very nice as well. But this weapon is like the complete fucking package. It's just such a great weapon. It has a lot going for it. It has a lot of utility with that charge R2. You know, just the general moveset on the weapon is pretty standard, but it's also very effective. It's just such a well-rounded weapon that's just going to absolutely bulldoze through any content that Elden Ring provides. All right, moving on over to the armor and talismans I would recommend taking if you are going to use the Ruined Greatsword. For the helmet, we do have Mushroom Crown. For the chest piece, we do have the Rakshasa armor, we have Rakshasa gauntlets, and we also have the Rakshasa greaves. So these 3 pieces of the Rakshasa armor are going to give us 6% increase to all damage. Do not worry about the negative, because the negative is completely obsolete. The only reason you're supposed to take more damage when you're wearing this armor is because it has lower armor stats than some of the other armor in its category. For the talismans, we have Two-Handed Sword Talisman, Kindred of Rot Exaltation, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, and also the Shard of Alexander. Now, you're probably scratching your head if you haven't seen any of my videos before, wondering why the fuck I've got the Kindred of Rot's Exaltation, the Mushroom Crown, and Poison Hand, and Deadly Poison Perfume Bottle. You probably think I'm snorting bath salts or something. No, the reason I've got this set up is we just have enough endurance to actually do it, but the Deadly Poison Perfume Bottle, Ash of War will apply poison to yourself, which will give you the buff from Poison Hand, Mushroom Crown, and also Kindred of Rot's Exaltation. Very nice, very situational. You're only getting these buffs for 20 seconds. But the Deadly Poison Perfume Bottle, you can easily just refresh that poison. And it also poisons enemies very, very quickly as well. So if you can't poison yourself, hey, sometimes poisoning the enemy is the next best option. So you can get a nice 0.7% increase in damage, which is absolutely nothing to sneeze at. And then the stats I would recommend if you do want to run the Ruined Greatsword for yourself at level 150, we have 60 Vigor, 16 Mind, 30 Endurance, 54 Strength, 16 Intelligence, and also 33 Faith. The main reason we have 33 Faith is so you can use all the buffs available and mainly Howl of Shabriri. Now next up we have Freya's Greatsword. Now Freya's Greatsword, aka the curved greatsword with a friggin' identity crisis, is actually an absolute powerhouse weapon that recently got added in with the new DLC. Now to actually wield Freya's Greatsword, you're going to need 25 strength and also 14 dexterity. And the scaling for this weapon, when it is fully maxed out to plus 25, is B for strength and E for dexterity, meaning this weapon scales pretty well with strength. But what makes this build so enjoyable to use? Why is the Freya's Greatsword even on this list? Well, the Freya's Greatsword has a little secret, a little ace up the sleeve, if you will. This weapon does enhance Redmane battle skills by 10%, I think it is. So your Savage Lion Claw, your Lion Claw, your Flame of the Redmane. And you can quickly see why Freya's Greatsword has kind of made it on this list, because when you slap Lion's Claw on this bad boy, it kicks ass. And that's all you really need to use this weapon. You can just Ash of War spam, Lion's Claw, until the cows friggin' come home. Lion's Claw is already a really, really strong Ash of War, but hey, giving it an extra 10% increased damage is very nice. Now the moveset for Freya's Greatsword is actually pretty decent as well. Like light attack's pretty standard. Your charge R2, you do an overhead chop and you can follow that charge R2 up with another charge R2 and you just do a double overhead chop. This is very satisfying to land on enemies, big elites and bosses. It does do pretty big damage and also very good posture damage. Same with the Lion's Claw. I completely forgot about it. The main reason you just spam Lion's Claw is because it does actually do pretty good posture damage. I'm in New Game Plus 7. All the clips you're going to be seeing are New Game Plus 7. And Lion's Claw has no trouble whatsoever still staggering enemies and bosses. All you need to do is whip like 2 or 3 of these out on the boss in quick succession, and they're on the ground tapping out for 3. Game over. And then of course, the main way I like to set this weapon up with the Ash of War is because we're doing a strength build. Just when you put Lion's Claw on, put it on heavy, you get A scaling in strength, you do get a massive chunk of extra damage, and you're going to see a much better result if you do scale this in heavy, especially with the stats I'm about to give you. Now moving on over to the armor and the talisman, big spoiler alert, this setup is exactly the same as the last setup. The Raxasar armor is just too good, despite the fact that it just gives you increase to all damage basically for free, and we're using the same setup with the self-poisoning to get the buffs from Poison Hand, Mushroom Crown, and also Kindred of Rot's Exaltation. Now alternatively, you could take off the Rotten Wing Sword insignia and you could put on the Axe Talisman. This is just going to increase your charge attack. Like I said, the charge attack with Freya's Greatsword is pretty good. You can follow it up with another charge R2 in kind of a quick succession. So if you do want to do a charge spamming kind of build as well as spamming Lion's Claw, take off Rotten Wing Insignia, put on Axe Talisman, and that might work out for you. Now for the stats I would recommend you take if you want to try out Freya's Greatsword for yourself, I would recommend having 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 31 Endurance, 61 Strength, 14 Dex, and also 25 Faith. Main reason we have 25 Faith is just so you can use Golden Vow and also Flame Grant Me Strength. Now to move on over to everyone's favorite strength weapon, Guts' Dragon Slayer Sword. Oh, I'm sorry. I mean the heavy greatsword. If you do want to wield the greatsword for yourself, you're going to need 31 strength and also 12 dexterity. And then when it's fully leveled up at plus 25, the scaling for this weapon is B for strength and D for dexterity, meaning it scales pretty well with strength. So what makes the greatsword so enjoyable to play? Well, for starters, you get to cosplay as your favorite character from Berserk, Guts. I mean, what more of a selling point do you need, boys? Come on. I think it goes without saying that using a giant colossal sword, you're probably going to have some really, really good poise damage, and the greatsword has no shortage of that. This thing is going to stagger enemies all day long. It's going to break bosses' poisons all day long. Giant Hunt does a good job at that as well. I think on Mode, New Game Plus 7, 3 Giant Hunts in quick succession. That motherfucker's on the ground getting ready for a fatal. And I suppose another really good benefit to this weapon is it's long. It's a long boy. You know what they say about big swords, boys? Big hands. No, but seriously, this weapon is crazy long. It has seriously got some length to it. It's got to be up there with one of the longest weapons in the game, I think. Not obviously the longest, but it's got to be definitely up there in terms of size, am I right? Which is good for just about all aspects of the game. You know, sometimes you're going to hit enemies when you don't think you're going to hit them because of the sheer length of the weapon. Now, the moveset for the greatsword is pretty standard. Your light attack's pretty standard. Your charge R2 is pretty standard. But it still works. It's still a fantastic moveset. And I think the best Ash of War to use on the greatsword has to probably be Lion's Claw. But I did just show Lion's Claw on the Freya's greatsword. So I wanted to try and show you guys another Ash that does work, that is very viable, and that Ash is Giant Hunt. Giant Hunt does not muck around. This Ash does not play fair. And just like the Lion's Claw, it does the exact same job of making the enemies look absolutely silly. So how this Ash works and why I really enjoy using it is when you use Giant Hunt, you take a very low stand before you just super thrust into the enemy and ruining their day. Now the key thing here is taking that low stand. Taking that very low stand will actually help you dodge a lot of the enemy's moves. Not all of them, but there are definitely a few moves that you can get through with Giant Hunt. And then you just follow up with a massive thrust that does massive damage. It's pretty straightforward, it's pretty simple, but it is very effective, and that is why I've chosen to put Giant Hunt on the greatsword. But keep in mind that I'm pretty sure the Lion's Claw is probably still going to be the best option. Now the way I like to set up my Ash of War is with the Giant's Hunt, we're just going to put that on heavy, making it the heavy greatsword. So when we do have our Ash of War on heavy, we do have A scaling with strength, which is definitely much better than a B, and stuff dexterity, we don't even care about it. And now for the armor and talismans, I am running with this setup. For the helmet, I've got the Horned Warrior's helmet. This is just going to increase our strength by 5. And of course, I've pretty much got the whole Rakshasar set here, giving us a nice 6% increase to all of our damage. And for the talismans, I got the two-handed sword talisman, Blade of Mercy, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, and Shard of Alexander. Now for the stats, I would recommend, if you do want to use the heavy greatsword for yourself, at level 150, you want to have 60 vigor, 18 mind, 38 endurance, 56 strength, 12 dexterity, and also 25 faith. Now up next, we have arguably my favorite strength weapon in the whole entire game, the powerful, the dreaded Great Star's Hammer. So if you want to wield the Great Star's Hammers for yourself, you're going to need 22 strength and also 12 dexterity. And the scaling for this weapon, when it is fully maxed out at plus 25, is C for strength and D for dexterity, meaning it's, you know, okay scaling with strength. But we're not leaving this in the standard scaling. If you do switch to the heavy, it does take it to an A in strength. So what makes this build so enjoyable to use in Elden Ring? Well, for starters, just like Freya's greatsword, the Great Stars also come with a hidden weapon. Landing attacks with this weapon slightly restores your HP, so if you use 2 of these, which is what we're doing when you power stance them, you're going to be getting more health per hit, especially when you do use the power stancing moveset. Already this weapon has a massive leg up with the fact that you can hit enemies and get health back. On top of that, this weapon also has native bleed buildup on the weapon itself. It has 55 bleed buildup, so when you have 2 of these weapons, you have 110 bleed buildup if you do use the power stancing moveset, which is pretty good. That bleed buildup is going to reveal its ugly head to the enemy sooner or later. And pretty much the only way I like using these weapons when they are power stance, or even if you're two-handering it for that matter, is just jump attack. Jump attack, jump attack, jump attack, jump attack, and you will win the game. It's just that simple, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, the moveset is pretty standard. It's still very effective, but those jump attacks, especially when you build into jump attacks, seriously hit very hard, and it's pretty easy to break the enemy's posture. Why jump attacking with the Great Star, especially with 2 of them? It's an overall very comfy build, and it's one that I always find myself going back to if I just want to cheese the game very easily. And then the Ash of War that I really enjoy using with the Great Stars is just Cragblade. Cragblade On heavy affinity, you could also go Crag Blade. Like I said, you could go blood affinity, which will give you 139 blood buildup. Now, the main reason I'm using Crag Blade, for anyone that does not know, when you use Crag Blade on your weapon, it increases its attack power and also its poise damage. So when you put this on a weapon that already has good damage and good poise damage, it just sends this weapon to the moon. No, but seriously, Crag Blade does actually make a very, very big difference. Now, for the armor and talismans, I am running with this particular setup. For the helmet, we have white mask. The chest piece, we have the new Gravebird armor, which does increase our jump attack power. And then, of course, I hate saying this over and over again, but we have the Raxasar gauntlets and the Raxasar greaves. And then for the talismans, we have the Claw talismans, Lord of Blood Exaltation, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, and also Millicent's Prosthesis. With this particular setup, we're just trying to get the most out of our jump damage, getting extra attack power when bleed, it does go off in the vicinity. Now, in the clips in the background, you're probably seeing me use the Great Stars weapon with blood affinity on them, which is not what I am showing here. I realize that that's not exactly a strength build, so to speak. You have to invest a few points in arcane, which makes these weapons a hell of a lot stronger, don't get me wrong. This is probably the preferred way to set up the Great Stars, is just with blood affinity. But because I was a smooth brain individual, I completely forgot. You can also use Blood Flame Blade, which does give 70 blood buildup onto the weapon, so it will have 125 on this one weapon, which does have more blood buildup than if you were to power stance the weapons. I'm pretty sure that's how it works out. So if you're someone that doesn't want to power stance, you can use it this way, which I think might actually come out to be the same, if not maybe a little better. If you don't mind applying that Blood Flame Blade onto the Great Stars like every 30 seconds, I think. So at least this way you do keep it strength focused, but if you do want to go arcane focused, the Great Stars definitely benefit a lot of putting it into bleed affinity. Now, going over the stats, if you do want to use the Great Stars build at level 150, you are going to want 60 vigor, 15 mind, 30 endurance, 69 strength, 12 dexterity, and 25 faith. So next weapon on this list is another brand new weapon from the DLC. A weapon that makes PvP invaders absolutely cower in fear, makes them soil their pants when they see this bad boy come out. And that weapon is none other than the Ancient Meteoric Ore Greatsword. Now, this weapon is the last weapon that I'm going to be talking about that isn't just going to be primarily strength scaling. Now, unfortunately, this weapon just missed out on the top 6 arcane build video. There was just a few other bleed builds that I think were a little bit better than the Meteoric Greatsword, but I really wanted to put this weapon on this list, so I'm definitely happy that it's going in on this list. If you want to wield the Meteoric Greatsword for yourself, you're going to need 35 strength, 10 dexterity, and also 19 arcane. So the scaling for this weapon, when it is fully maxed out at plus 10, it is going to be B for strength, E for dexterity, and also D for arcane, meaning this weapon scales pretty well with strength, and you also will get a bit of bonus damage if you put points into arcane. So what makes this weapon slash build so enjoyable to use in Elden Ring? Well, for starters, this weapon has arguably got to have one of the coolest Ashes of War for a colossal sword, and that is White Light Charge, baby. Having White Light Charge on this weapon is a fantastic idea. You always feel slow and sluggish with colossal weapons and colossal sword, so why not give a colossal sword a crazy charging ability that actually has good distance and you move pretty quick? And then the cherry on top of that delicious cake that is the Meteoric Greatsword is that after you do that White Light Charge, you just repress your Ash of War button and boom! Out comes a very tasty AoE explosion. And this does really big damage. You're going to catch a lot of people off guard in PvP with this as well. It does some absurd damage in PvP. This weapon is broken in PvP. I had so much success with this weapon, and I'm not someone that plays PvP. I suck. But outside of PvP, you are looking to hit like 3 to 4k with the whole of this Ash of War, the charge followed by the explosion. The explosion does do very good poise damage. The weapon overall has some fantastic poise damage, being a colossal sword, obviously. So I'm kind of getting across that I really like spamming the Ash of War with this weapon. But that's not all this weapon has going for it. The Charge R2 on the Meteoric Greatsword is banging. It is fantastic. You just get a massive poke. Now, I'm not sure if you've seen the weapon, but it is quite long, so being able to poke forward with it covers a lot of distance as well. There's plenty of time that I've hit the boss where I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure I wasn't anywhere near the boss, but somehow this weapon still covers that distance. And then the R2 does have a pretty decent follow-up where you do like a big backward slash, which is going to catch a lot of tall enemies off guard. You're just going to whack them in the face. Flying enemies have no hope getting out of the way of this charge R2 when you do get the full combo off. It's just such a great all-round weapon that fits in pretty much every strength build. You can use in jump builds, you can use dash it builds, Asher Ward spamming build, charge R2 spam builds. Like it has a lot in its toolkit, and it's just overall a very, very solid weapon. So going over the armor and the talismans, we have Fire Knight's Helm. Big surprise again, we have the Rakshasa armor here again. We have, yep, the armor gauntlets and the greaves. 6% increase of damage. It's hard to take off, okay? And then I've got the Fire Knight Helm. You pretty much put whatever helm you want, but this helm at least increases our max HP, stamina, and equipment load, which goes a long way since we are kind of heavy. You might not have to put so many points into endurance with this helmet on. I haven't accounted for that in the stats, but you know, at least this helmet does give us more equipment load. For the talismans, I've got two-handed sword talisman, Shard of Alexander, the rotten wing sword insignia, and also the axe talisman. Got the axe talisman for those charge attacks, the Shard of Alexander so we can spam the Asher War. The two-handed sword talisman just gives us a plus 15% increase in all damage because we're always two-handing, and we all know what the rotten winged sword insignia does. Now moving on over to the stats, if you do want to use the meteoric ore greatsword for yourself at level 150, we have 60 vigor, 15 mind, 32 endurance, 56 strength, 12 dexterity, 25 faith, and also 22 arcane. Alright, now last but definitely not least, a weapon that I'm pretty sure everyone knows and has heard of before. It's definitely not a stranger in these lands, and that is the Giant Crusher. Now this weapon is an absolute powerhouse, and I'm pretty sure it has one of the most hefty strength requirements in the whole entire game. So if you do want to wield this weapon for yourself, you're going to need 60 strength. And only 60 strength. This is the biggest Unga of any bunga in the whole entire game. And the scaling for this weapon, when it is fully maxed out at plus 25, is B for strength. But when you scale this weapon into heavy affinity, its scaling for strength does become S, baby, because it's a fucking S tier weapon. So what makes this build so enjoyable to play? Well, it's got to be one of the biggest pancake makers in the whole entire game, and I'm sure everyone loves pancakes, am I right, guys? This is going to flatten every single enemy you come in contact with. Doesn't matter how big or strong they are, except maybe some enemies in the DLC. This will break their poise. This will just knock them down. It will stagger them, and then you can keep hitting them, and then it will break their poise. Sorry, I probably got that a little confused there. You will be staggering the enemies a lot, and then you will be breaking their poise very consistently with this weapon. And bosses are no different. New game plus 7, you still break bosses' poises with at least 2 or 3 charge attacks, or if you use Lion's Claw or Savage Lion's Claw, it only takes 2 or 3 cast of the Asher War for you to actually break the poise or posture of pretty much most bosses in the whole entire game. It's just that strong. I will say one of the biggest negatives to this weapon is it is slow. It's definitely on the slow side, but like I was just explaining before, if you paired this up with Lion's Claw or Savage Lion's Claw, I mean Lion's Claw is still a little better, but I am just showing you Savage Lion's Claw just to show you something different, show that this weapon does work with other Ashes of War instead of the ones I'm already showing you. But when you do pair this up with any of the Lion's Claw, you do get a lot more mobility on this weapon. You can clear a lot more distance with the Ash of War. With that first somersault, you do actually clear distance with it. When you put the Lion's Claw Ash on the Giant Crusher, it is definitely very hard to take off. The only thing that comes close is Royal Knight's Resolve. Royal Knight's Resolve increases the damage of your next hit. The only issue is you have to keep reapplying the Ash of War every time you hit the enemy if you want to try and do maximum amount of damage. But Royal Knight's Resolve is really, really fun to play around with. You just charge R2 spam, try and hit the enemy, and you do like 5-6k damage in base game, not DLC, which is just absurd. I have seen people use 2 Giant Crushers at once. That seems crazy to me because they're just super heavy. One's fine. One is now fine, especially because you have the two-handed sword talisman, which is going to buff this weapon by 15% while you are two-handing it. You're not going to get that if you're power stancing. So I feel like you can squeeze a little bit more damage out while two-handing, but hey, those jump attacks do come out pretty quick. But of course, I'm sure you guys have all used or at least heard of the Giant Crusher, but for anyone that hasn't, it is a seriously banging weapon. It flattens just about everything inside Elden Ring. If you haven't tried it out, I highly recommend that you do. Now moving on over to the armor and the talismans that we are running with with this setup. For the helmet, we have the Fire Prelate's helm. I've tried putting on a different helmet. It doesn't really matter with this build. I've just put on the Fire Prelate's helm because it takes us to 51 poise. That's it. We do have the Raptor's Black Feathers. This is just for whenever we want to jump attack. We are going to get a nice, like, what is it, like 10% extra damage. And I bet you couldn't see this one coming, but we have Rakshasa Gauntlets and the Rakshasa Greaves on this build as well. They're too good. What do you want me to do? Free damage, it's free damage. For the talismans, we have the Two-Handed Sword Talisman, Shard of Alexander, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, and Blade of Mercy. Now, Blade of Mercy is pretty good because we're using a weapon that's going to break enemies' posture, stagger them a lot. So when you do knock them down for a fatal and you go for that fatal blow, I'm pretty sure that counts as a critical hit. So when you do get a critical hit on the enemy, when they go down, when you've broken their posture, you will gain 20% increase to damage, all damage. So Blade of Mercy is very strong if you can break enemies' postures, or maybe if you're using a parry build. Now for the stats, I would recommend running if you do want to use the Giant Crusher at level 150. We have 60 Vigor, 20 Mind. The reason we got a little bit extra Mind is because Lion's Claw, Savage Lion's Claw is a bit of an expensive Ash to cast. But I feel like with 20 Mind, you could probably go down to 18. I think you should be alright to at least get a couple of cast off before you have to down some of that blue juice. We have 39 Endurance, 58 Strength, and also 25 Faith. This is just so we have access to Golden Vow and also Flame Grant Me Strength. And that is basically it for the video, guys. Hopefully, I didn't bore you guys to death. And if I didn't bore you to death with this video, like the friggin' video. I feel like that deserves a like. If you didn't fall asleep, maybe hit that like button. It helps support the channel. Now, hopefully this video does help you guys out. Do you agree with my top 6? Is there anything you would have added in here? Is there anything you would have changed? Let me know in the comment section down below. There is a few weapons that definitely didn't make it to this list, like the Night Raider's Glaive, the Star Fist, and also the Great Sword of Solitude. They just missed it. They just missed out on this list. Like I said, there's just too many good weapons. I basically was having a mental breakdown trying to figure out what the 6th one was going to be because there's just too many options, man. There was too many. Appreciate all love and support as always, guys, and until next time, stay safe. Peace out.